Part 40. Arcane Age. Author, Yulin Dudu. Chapter 400. In the small hall, almost one-third of the female guests in the dinner were gathered, which is a remarkable phenomenon. Zai Wei completed the photo with each aristocratic girl at a very fast speed. Although he had to be smothered with oil, he was completely removed from the rouge. Princess Lucia seems to have the idea of in-depth conversation with him, but Zai Wei still found a reason to quickly leave the Orleans manor after many eyes of the man who secretly cast a gaze and a woman's burning eyes. About half of the aristocratic girls who appear here are aristocrats. As the name implies, the blood left in their bodies is not completely pure human blood. Even the lowest and the thinnest blood, it will have a consequence, that is, reproductive isolation. Moreover, the higher the blood concentration, the stronger the blood pulse level, the greater the difficulty of giving birth to offspring, and the natural self-contained contraceptive effect. Zai Wei has also learned the secrets of some aristocrats. The family of the French royal family, which has been passed down to the blood of the golden lion, must prepare in advance for each new offspring, and even spend a lot of resources and money to allocate some kind of the secret medicine, to create an environment, in order to give birth to a healthy child with a higher probability of awakening the blood. Moreover, the consumption of resources by this kind of secret medicine is an extremely heavy burden to the royal family. Therefore, for the noble aristocratic family, there will not be too much after each generation. On the contrary, those who have risen in recent years have no noble blood heritage. Some people count on illegitimate children and even make hundreds of descendants. These people have been ridiculed by the aristocrats without exception. Therefore, after thousands of years, these aristocrats still maintain a very close relationship and mutual marriage, which is to better complete the bloodline. Both parents are aristocrats, a great chance will be born to a younger generation than the single aristocrats. And Zai Wei can completely become the Japanese elf form, and it is not transformed with magic, but is real. When it was taken with Zai Wei, several aristocratic girls secretly verified it. This means that Zai Wei is running with the blood of the almost pure Japanese elf. As long as it can be combined with Zai Wei, the born child will have a great chance to inherit the blood of the elf, and it is also possible to pass on the blood of his family. Even for the aristocratic family, Zai Wei has a very strong appeal, let alone those nobles who are completely mortal. So as soon as he entered the venue of the Orleans manor, Zai Wei was like a humanoid potion thrown into the boiling crowd. He sensed the true emotions of many people, with cover or no cover, wanted to go on a passionate journey with him, and more wanted to have a child belonging to him. Such a utilitarian heart is simply an unbearable stench for 11 Wei, even though these girls are mostly beautiful people above the standard. Therefore, after Zai Wei resisted the discomfort and quickly escaped the Orleans manor, which was a horror castle, he was a lot easier. After this night's encounter, Zai Wei did not intend to integrate into the world, he must transform the world according to his own ideals. No matter what kind of power and resources are occupied by these nobles, they have an unbreakable and noble status. Under the impact of the times, there will be no resistance. Violet Island, Violet College, where is your home, where you should stay? Zai Wei has decided to leave Pai Li to return to Violet Island as soon as the Midsummer Night Music Festival ends. The Violet Chamber of Commerce and the Par Daily have already been on the right track. There is a card here to support the overall situation. It should not be picked up again. What waves? The first edition of the Parley Daily tomorrow will resume normal newspaper and magazine structure, and the standing characters will no longer be held. Such sales of newspapers and magazines will inevitably have a big decline, but 500,000 copies of sales are a miracle that is impossible to reproduce, so smooth landing is the best ending. When Zai Wei returned to Par, it was already the 10th magic time of the night, but with the arrival of summer, there was a burning scent in the air, and Zai Wei gently tapped a finger and there was a group. The cool breeze blew in the room and it was so refreshing. Somehow, Ziwei had a hard time getting a little sleepy. He lay quietly on the bed and quickly fell into a deep sleep. A dream has appeared. Ziwei found himself in the dark wilderness, and there was no feedback except himself, as if he had been placed in the eternal darkness of imprisonment. Ziwei snorted, and on the way back to Par, he felt a very hidden but malicious spying. Although Ziwei is still suppressed at the level of the six-ring magician, he has reached the level of master class in the elements, space and change, and the protection, summoning, and construction have reached the level of the high-level magician. The rumors of arrogance can be said to speak of actual combat ability, far beyond the ordinary magic master. This time, the person who secretly spies on him can subtly suppress his spiritual sensation. If it is not in the communication with the Zero Soul, Ziwei cannot detect this attack. The spirit of the other side is not much stronger than that of Ziwei, but in the application level, it has left the West Street, so there is only one possibility, that is, a spiritual master of the spiritual school is suppressing his spiritual consciousness. Try to invade your soul. Then I learned from the card Myoka that after the fascinating White Crow pub is a stronghold of the soul mage, Ziwei still had the idea to go and find out, but did not expect to directly confront the master of spiritual magic. For Ziwei, this is a way of fighting that he is completely unfamiliar. The soul spell is so mysterious that Ziwei has almost no knowledge of it. However, Ziwei also has enough cards, so he is not afraid, but this confrontation is a great opportunity to understand his soul spells. The Change School focuses on the body, the Element School is pure in magic, the Space School builds the model in the soul, and the Spiritual School uses the most spiritual power. In this dark fog, the strength of Ziwei was greatly suppressed, and he almost completely lost contact with his body and the vast magic. This is undoubtedly a very deep soul spell. Ziwei falls into the enemy's cobweb like a prey, and this kind of fighting is what the other party is best at. The sense of spirit was suppressed, and Ziwei could no longer use the spiritual power to explore the surrounding space. Ziwei directly opened the Eye of Silver Moon in the series of spells of Ilana. Although it is only a zero-loop spell, it contains the power of Ms Yin Yu. Although Ziwei rarely used the Silver Moon Eye spell after mastering the Real Magic Eye, now the Real Magic Eye loses its effect, but it needs the evil spirit of the Silver Moon Eye. The silvery light shone, and the two pupils of Ziwei were dyed into non-human bright silver. Under this time, Ziwei found himself falling into a huge white spider web. It seems as if the tumbling fog is woven, but it erodes the spiritual power of Ziwei in silence. It disintegrates the resistance of Ziwei bit by bit, as if it is cutting the meat of Ziwei with a knife, but there is no sense at all. At this moment, neither elements nor changing spells can protect Ziwei, and Ziwei does not want to completely expose the secret of being able to be etherified. This secret should be used for the legendary magician of the future elemental school, not for fighting. Then Ziwei's sharpest fighting spell is undoubtedly the Iluna series spell from the blessing of Ms Silver Moon. After being promoted to the 6th ring, 11 Wei also got a new blessing spell from Ms Yin Yu, Silver Moon God Clothes. This is the first protective spell in the series of Arca's blessed spells, although it is only 6 rings, but far beyond the effect of most 7-ring protection spells. The silver light that shines like a moon glow is still completely enveloped in the dreams of Ziwei, forming a guanghua clothing with the silver moon power. The white spider web that was being eroded and deprived by Ziwei was immediately poured into the hot water after touching the silver moon clothes, and quickly retreated back. Even for the enemies formed by pure spirits, Elena's blessing spells can still play a great role. Ziwei directly began to sing the spell of Star Strike, summoning the power of the stars to destroy the enemies in the fog. As if to sense the power of more and more stars, the huge white spider web melted instantly, and turned into a white crow, fluttering wings. Obviously, after the opponent failed, he chose to leave. Ziwei naturally will not let go of his opponent easily. Half of the Star Strike spells have been interrupted. Ziwei directly marks the silver moon guide and locks the crow of white smoke, and then breaks the other side. In the moment of opening a dark dream, I launched the star shuttle spell and chased each other into another plane. Come in. Ziwei knows that the soul mages have their own holy land in the legend of the soul, the dream of the soul. Just like the buried bones for the necromancer, the soul dream plane is the home of all spiritual wizards. The difference between the horizon of the mind and most of the plane is that it is not a pure material plane, but a plane of mental energy and material mixture. A similar dark plane is a plane of shadow energy and matter. The white crow in front of Ziwei instantly transformed into a white humanoid creature. He held a spear with a white bone in his right hand, and his face showed a sullen smile. I really didn't think that you dared to enter the dream of the heart. Here, even Ms. Yunya can't shelter you. 11 Wei did not pay attention to the other party's provocation. In the moment when he made the plane shuttle, Zero also jumped in. The two people who had mastered the 20 neck inscriptions were working together to crack the space logo of this plane. The mind dream is a very large plane, and there are also a lot of mind mage and dream creatures, but this plane does not have a real master. Therefore, Ziwei is still able to obtain the space mark of this plane, which is the key to the dream of Ziwei again. Therefore, in order to delay the time, Ziwei began to communicate with the opposite of this spiritual life. I can know why you are looking for me. Who wants to be against me? Do you think that I am the kind of fool who has forgotten to reveal everything? The white misty man smiled and said, although I am very simple to clean up here, I will not leave a trace of hidden danger. Young element mage, in the dream of the mind, I can do anything. With the laughter of mania, the spear in the hands of the white mist suddenly threw it out and directed at Ziwei. Ziwei could not escape, as if it was locked by a causal weapon. This white spear shot directly into the heart of Ziwei. In the dream of the mind, no one can be the flesh and blood, although the real body of Ziwei is indeed here, but in the moment of entering this plane, his body is assimilated into the body of the spirit. However, the spiritual masters have long used this plane as their home. They live here, fight here, and get familiar with everything here. Ziwei is forced to become a spiritual body. This white spear penetrated the heart of the spirit of the Ziwei spirit, took a large piece of spiritual silk, and then crossed a perfect arc, once again fell into the hands of white virtual shadow. He picked up the white spear and gently removed the cotton thread like a marshmallow on the tip of the spear, slowly stuffed it into the mouth, and swallowed it into the stomach. It's a perfect food, the white illusion reveals an intoxicating smile, so fresh and sweet, not as decaying as before. You are really a big tonic. After the white spear was isolated, Ziwei felt that his mental power had instantly decreased by a large chunk, and his spiritual body was also reduced. Obviously, once all the mental power has been completely swallowed up by the other party, the body of Ziwei will become a state similar to a vegetative person, not far from death. 8 plus or minus wonderful, asterisk, pen 8 plus or minus 8 plus or minus, oh. This kind of combat is so strange that Ziwei has never seen it. He stopped cracking the space mark and began to find a solution to the problem. As the other side said, Yunya divine power has been unable to get a response. Obviously, the Silver Moon goddess cannot shelter herself here. With regard to the mystery of the soul, only one of the emotional magics that Ziwei learned from Mrs. Winschell was closer. Ziwei directly used the mind barrier spell in emotional magic, and his spiritual body changed instantly, gradually shrinking and condensing, and eventually it turned into a crystal-like solidified crystal. This mind barrier spell has exceeded the level of the original two-ring spell in the hands of Ziwei, but represents the highest level of Ziwei's use and understanding of mental power. Ha ha ha, that's ridiculous, White Phantom sneered and said, do you think this will block me? It just makes me eat faster. Arcane Age. Author, Yulin Dudu. Chapter 401. The white spear was thrown out again, and it still easily penetrated the spiritual barrier of Ziwei, and once again took away a large line of spiritual power. This time, because Ziwei took the initiative to unite itself, the total amount of mental power taken away far exceeded that of the previous one, and it has exceeded 1/5 of all the spiritual power of Ziwei. The white illusion seems to have completely made Ziwei a delicious dish that cannot be resisted. He is enjoying it. This white illusion is the twin brother of the Marquis of Closel, who is so weak and sick, that even the radiant magic can't be cured. He can only lie in bed all the time, far less like the brother who awakened the family blood. He often does all kinds of nightmares, and he can see many strange existences that ordinary people can't see. This is the reason why spiritual power is too extraordinary, and it is also the best talent to become a spiritual master. When he was 8 years old, he was taken away by a spiritual wizard to begin the practice of the spiritual spell path. In less than 50 years, he has become an 8-ring spiritual magic master, even in the whole spiritual dream. In it, it can be regarded as a rising star. Although the temptation to Sylvester Frost originated from his brother's request, he himself also had a great interest in Sylvester Frost, a magician who developed a new vitality in the elemental school that had gradually fallen behind. The spiritual school's magician is almost in the civil war of the magician. In addition to the protection school's protective magic for the soul spell, the other schools are not very targeted to the soul magician. On the contrary, both the Silver Moon Church and the Glorious Lord Church have the spirit of restraining the spiritual school. This is why, when 11 Wei Shi exhibited the Silver Moon magic, Davy was forced to withdraw from his temporary dream. However, what he never imagined was that Ziwei dared to follow him into the dream of the soul. At that moment, he almost laughed, and this is really a dead end. Although the total amount of mental power of Sylvester Frost is not much smaller than that of himself, in terms of mental power, the two are the difference between fully armed fighters and ordinary people. What makes Davy even more pleasant is that the spiritual strength of Sivy Frost is full of a kind of luscious vitality. The efficiency of transforming this mental power into its own spiritual power is very high. It can be said that as long as it can completely devour Ziwei the mental strength, the total amount of oneself can increase by at least 20%. So in this case, Davy plundered the spiritual thread from the spiritual body of Ziwei again and again, and then swallowed it into his mouth. Seeing that the spiritual body of Ziwei is getting dimmer and weaker, Dai's smile is getting more and more brilliant. This is a feast. Ziwei really has no backhand power, let the master of spiritual magic be slaughtered in front of him. No, there are at least 3 ways for Ziwei to escape the dream of centrifugation. On the one hand, he has already solved the spatial landmark of the mind's dream, and already has the ability to shuttle the plane, and can easily evacuate at any time. Second, once he completes the transformation of the ether, his whole body becomes an etheric element, and naturally he can also isolate the other's erosion of his mental strength. Third, as long as the Silver Moon ceremony is reopened and praying to Ms Yin-Yu, the Silver Moon power can still penetrate the space barrier and shine into the spiritual dream. However, this is the most inferior decision. On the one hand, Ziwei will inevitably shift to the believers of Ms Yin-Yu. On the other hand, there are many mysterious powers lurking in the dream of the mind. Silver Moon power can help. He defeated Davy, but it is likely to lead to more unnecessary trouble. Ziwei is not a rookie who has just come to this world and has no understanding of the extraordinary power and the human body. For the magician, the soul spiritual magic body is undoubtedly a 4-layer parallel structure from the inside out. The soul is the most valuable and most valuable element. It is not just a magician. The gods actually go further on this road. The spiritual power is a kind of application of the soul energy between the soul and the magic. It can't connect the external energy, and it can't express the magic power of all kinds of wind and rain. However, in the hands of the psychic mage, the use of spiritual power has been tempered to the extreme, like the assassin in The Magician, concealed, invisible, and one hit, and it is impossible to prevent. This is why the Mind Master and the Necromancer are listed in the glory of the world by the Church of the Glorious Lord. But is the Mind Mage really invincible? Not really. Not to mention the restraint of the two churches on the spiritual master, the protective school has also developed protective spells against the spiritual school, effectively sheltering the soul and spirit of oneself and others. Different from the extensive inheritance of other schools, the spiritual school adopts the original secret apostolic teaching method. Almost all knowledge and spells are the best secrets. Never allow leakage. The spiritual school is so strict that it is strictly guarded against its mystery. It is the mystery of the soul spell that has been seen by others. If it is not a spiritual dream, this large-scale plane that fits the soul mage is unearthed. I am afraid that the inheritance of the spiritual master has long been the Church of the Glorious Lord. It was cut off. Zai now has enough exercise in the three major factors of soul, magic, and body. The only weakness is the use of spiritual power. Therefore, for Zai, this is not a terrible encounter, but a God-sent opportunity to truly gain the mystery of the soul. At the moment of entering the soul's dream plane, Zai and Zero completed the exchange. Zai used the space spells learned from the 24 empty inscriptions to temporarily break into the space crack, and Dai continued to use the spiritual method. Spear harvesting is the spiritual power of Zero. However, Zero is the core of intelligence. All the spiritual powers have their own brand, and they are re-edited with a unique language structure. It seems to be loose, but like a memory metal, it can restore its original appearance at any time. After a long time, Devi completely swallowed up the spirit of the spirit that belonged to the Master Zai. He sat satisfied with his satisfaction. This is really a good harvest. However, in the next moment, his face changed greatly, and the whole body suddenly began to tremble violently. Then there was a huge change, as if there was a monster growing in the stomach. After being completely swallowed into the abdomen, Zero completed the reorganization in an instant, and all the spiritual powers belonging to her fell back into control. These mental powers have been perfectly integrated with the spiritual power of Dai itself. Have me, I have you. At this moment, Devi and Zero began to compete for control of this spiritual body, which will determine who is the real winner. To be continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Arcane Age. Author, Yulin Dudu. Chapter 402. Devi is far more skilled than Zero in his use of mental power, and his total amount of mental power is also greater. Therefore, he should have gradually gained the upper hand and eventually swallowed up the spirit of eliminating Zero. However, Zai has come out of the space crack, standing quietly in front of the white misty spirit that is still changing. Dai was so shocked at this moment. Of course he could recognize that the spiritual body in front of him belonged to Zai, but what was it that he had swallowed in before? Why are the two people so similar? Isn't the Master Sylvester Frost is actually two people, the same twins as themselves? However, his spiritual body is changing dramatically, and he is unable to make a surprised expression. 11 Wei's hand was pressed on the body of this spirit, and a horrible shock from the depths of the soul began to resonate to the spirit of Dai and Zero in one place. With the death ritual ceremony, Zai entered the endless river of sorrow, impassioned in the endless river of sorrow, refined soul, and finally condensed into an extremely rare dream star. Known as the dream star diamond, it means that the soul of Zai has undergone numerous shocks of endless rivers, and all the soul impurities have been refined and melted, and finally sublimated into the purest and most shining soul. What Zai is doing now is to simulate the turbulence of endless rivers and completely suppress the spiritual core of Dai. Although he could not grasp the essence of the endless river, but spent all night in the endless river, he had enough memories of how well his soul was. After returning from the endless river, Zai Wei has recalled the process of the refinement countless times, trying to reproduce it. Once he can master the skills of soul rehearsing, even if it only has 1% effect in the endless river, it will also be a very rare secret to gaining soul. Due to the lack of sufficient resources and experimental objects, Zai Wei's progress in this area is not great, but now, this spiritual body is the best experimental object. Zero also participated in the experiment of Zai Wei, who is already very familiar with the endless river shock, which has little effect on her. However, for Devi, this is the most terrible torture. The most powerful spiritual use of the mind master has almost no resistance before this unknown shock. His spiritual core has lost most of his activity in an instant, and he has lost control of the whole spirit in a flash. Zero starts to attack the city, quickly control the whole spirit, and strive to win this battle quickly. Zai Wei constantly changes the frequency, angle, and energy of the shock, which is undoubtedly a very rare magic experiment, and with his own is a master of spiritual magic used by the elite spirit. Dai's complete loss of control is only a moment. He is a master of spiritual magic. He will soon regroup and endure the discomfort caused by the shock of this unknown direct attacking soul. Continue to fight with Zero. For a spiritual wizard who relies entirely on mental power, he must not fail in this battle. If Zai Wei is rid of most of the mental energy wolves, you can still recover slowly through long-term warming or some magical medicine. As long as you don't damage the source too much, you can still restore the original. But for a soul magician, once lost in a battle and lost most of his mental power, it means that the road is cut off. Even if you come back again, you will almost never hope for the magic of legendary spellcasters and legendary magicians. Bit. Therefore, in the unseen dark and lonely corner of the spiritual dream, Zai Wei and Zero joined forces and Dai to carry out a desperate struggle in the field of spiritual power. Devi had no choice but to hide any means. He tried his best to completely suppress the Zero in an instant, compressing the part she controlled to the extreme, and trying to separate the mental power of Zero. Once Devi realized his intention, Zero will be thrown out of the hole, then Dai, who has restored his full strength, will obviously control the whole situation again. In this unfavorable situation, Zero insisted on the final position, although it was compressed to the extreme by the other side, but it was like a pine tree that did not relax in the green hills, and the connection between the spirit and the body was maintained, and in the desperate struggle constantly learned to imitate the skills of the other side's mental power. And Zai Wei is not idle, he has been adjusting the elements of shock. It is foreseeable that a super spell involving the origin of the soul is gradually forming. This spell can be named Stitch River. This spell points directly to the origin of the soul. If the subject does not have enough tough and powerful soul source, I am afraid that the soul will be weakened in an instant. The corner of the whole spiritual dream broke out brighter and brighter, and the spiritual body belonging to Zai Wei began to continually oscillate. In this turbulent process, his spiritual power in the spell is increasing. Getting stronger and stronger, the pressure on Devi is getting bigger and bigger. Finally, Zai Wei finally grasps the moment when the shock is most like enjoying in the endless river. He is all over the body. The spirit of this moment resonated with this spell, and a dazzling glimpse of the ultimate radiance instantly rushed out into the sky, illuminating the dark wilderness of half of the soul dream. Just as the light shining straight into the sky shines in the dream of the soul, a white cloud carriage patrolling the sky above the dreamland suddenly turns its direction and rushes straight into this desolate wilderness. There are two elite soul hunters sitting on the carriage. They hold a similar psychic spear in the hands of Dai. It is a powerful guardian guarding the dream of the soul. After the resonance, the Styx shock spell can finally be said to show the power it deserves. At this moment, the horrible energy shock completely defeats the spiritual core hidden by Devi in the depths of the spirit. It seems that a powerful army has lost its own coach, and the warriors who had attacked the city and omnipotent are in a state of collapse. The Zero that has been compressed to the extreme has quickly started a counterattack, assimilation of all spiritual bodies, and the fruits of victory. The speed of the white cloud carriage is so fast, it took less than 2 minutes to reach the shining place of the light column. Appearing in front of the two soul hunters is the spiritual body of a spiritual wizard, sparkling, so succinct, so powerful, far beyond the standards of both of them. This is a spiritual wizard above the master level. Since the spiritual school has been hiding for hundreds of years, the spiritual masters of the spiritual school are rare, and they can easily recognize any master of spiritual magic. Master Devi, hello. What happened just now? The two soul hunters performed a mage ceremony and then asked respectfully. To be continued. Arcane Age. Author, Yulin Dudu. Chapter 403. I have a conflict with a magician. He dared to chase the dream of the soul. Master Devi showed a smug smile. Here, he left a heavy price, and finally fled. Looking at the spirit of Master Dai's spirit is so shining, but also with an abnormal bloated, apparently just swallowed up a lot of mental power, has not yet had time to digest. The two soul hunters are inexplicably picked up, but they dare not disrespect a master of magic. Congratulations to Master Devi. The two soul hunters took the envy and hatred and boarded the foggy carriage. The shape of Master Devi changed again and changed completely. It became a horrible monster that was constantly creeping. It can still be divided into 3 big blocks and still rolling. Endless entanglement. At the moment of the millennium, Ziwei had to incorporate this spiritual body, temporarily forcibly shaping and simulating the voice of the spiritual master named Dai, and deceived two soul hunters. At this moment, Ziwei also joined the war for the dominance of the spiritual body. He and the Zero still maintain the communication of the soul level. The two are so tacit, slow but firm, will be lost under the Sky River spell. The resistance of the Devi was stripped and peeled off. On the use of spiritual power, although Ziwei and Zero can only be regarded as students, the teacher of Dai has a fundamental level difference with Ziwei on the soul level. He can't bear the tempering and shock of simulating the endless river. In the end, it became a loser. In the battle of the spiritual wizard, the loser will lose everything, and all become the winner's food. 11 Wei and Zero have gradually learned the skills of Dai Master's mental power in the short distance fight, and began to gradually absorb his memory and knowledge in the same way. After the 3 magical moments, the original bloated spirit body finally restored the normal human form, still the appearance of Master Dai, but the true Master Dai has disappeared. After peeling off the outer protection layer by layer, Ziwei finally completely destroyed Dai's soul with Sky River Shock. He not only died, but also lost all hope of resurrection, completely disappeared from the world. It is. Ziwei and Zero also received the spiritual inheritance and memory belonging to Dai. This is a valuable asset and a trophy for this sinister battle. If it wasn't for Ziwei's rehearsal of the soul into a fantasy star in the endless river of silence, if it's not for Ziwei's extreme time, the sound of the river would be so tempered by the soul magician. Then, this war Ziwei can't be a winner anyway. But now, Ziwei got everything, he succeeded. Although Devi had his own mage tower in the spiritual dream, Ziwei did not rush to acquire this wealth. He changed his figure and launched the astral shuttle spell. At the moment of the shuttle, he also brought out Dai, the flesh and blood body. In reality, Dai Master turned out to be a gnome who could not develop a complete body. His body was only 1 meter tall and too tall, but he had a beautiful face to some similar women's face. His eyes were closed, like a sleeping child, but his soul was annihilated and ushered in complete death. 11 Wei thought about it and still absorbed Devi's body into the zero space of the astral space. This is the safest place at present. Returning to his room, Ziwei began to analyze Dai's spiritual heritage and memory with Zero. He was eager to know what the consequences of the battle tonight would be. When Ziwei clearly understood everything, the sky was already white, and Ziwei sighed and stretched his arms. The spiritual wizard is undoubtedly a group of magicians who have gone astray. They focus on the use of mental power, while ignoring the cultivation of magic and physical aspects. They maintain the ancient secret sectarian style of masters and apprentices. For centuries, the spiritual school has not ushered in explosive development, regardless of spells or theories. There is hardly any improvement. They are the assassins and aliens in the magician, and they are also destined to be a poor worm that can't walk on the table. As an 8-ring magic master, Da-Ei died in the hands of Zai-Wei in the heart of the dream. It is precisely because his soul level is not high enough. This is also the biggest weakness of the spiritual school. Normal magicians must experience the reinvention of the heart of the lake to promote the middle class, comprehend the world's real promotion to the higher order, to go out of their own path to promote the masters of this hardship. In the process of the soul level continues to rise. Even if these magical masters are really accidentally contaminated with endless rivers, they can quickly escape, and they will not be as weak as Davy's resistance to the stitch of the river. The soul magician is ordinary for those the magician is so mysterious and horrible that they can dream, come without a trace, can control everything in your own hands, and harvest your life. However, for the real strong, these spiritual wizards have such obvious weaknesses, not enough to watch. Therefore, even if the inheritance of the spiritual school came to the end of the road, it could not see the light. Unless the inheritance of the spiritual school is fundamentally improved, this school cannot be born with the title legendary mage. However, the inheritance of the spiritual school is not useless. The various uses of mental power and the spells constructed on this basis make up the last piece of the 4 elements of the soul, the spirit, the magic, and the body. Shortboard. Zai-Wei can be convinced that for 2,000 years in the continent of Orient, there has never been a magician like him. Even if those legendary magicians will go farther than him, they definitely exceeded it. The level of the high-level magician. Master's card, a name that has fascinated countless people and struggled for a lifetime. This word is not a magician alone, but belongs to any professional. For the warrior, if you want to be a master, you must accumulate a limit on your chi, strength, and skill, perfectly control your body, and then sublimate through a real hardship to form your own unique heritage. Can be called the master class warrior. For the magician, although the inheritance is only classified into several colleges, but want to become a master of magic, if you can't integrate the basic spells of the majors, comprehend the essence of the school's spells, and create the most practical spells that fit your own. And these spells will be engraved in the soul, and there is no hope for advanced masters. To be continued. Arcane Age. Author, Yulin Dudu. Chapter 404. Inscribed in the soul, this is a very important thing for any magician. In the soul of Zai-Wei, there is a ring spell Arcane Missile and a 7-ring spell Space Survey. Arcane Missile is his experiment and thinking after thousands of times in the magic apprenticeship stage. He finally emulated the first magician of the human, Merlin, and directly printed the spell model on the soul, and promoted the formal magic. Division. The 7-ring spell Space Survey comes from the space inheritance of the second Logrodic. If Zai-Wei can master all 36 empty inscriptions one day, he can upgrade the spell to break through the universal world. The spells that the soul can carry are limited, and each jump can increase the load. The jump of the soul is very mysterious and can be expressed as a layer of transition of the electron orbit outside the nucleus. Therefore, the sublimation of the soul is not a little progress, but a direct jump to a track and jump to a higher level. Because of the shackles of the soul contract, Zai-Wei and Zero can perfectly maintain that the souls of the two are always on the same track and jump at the same time. The soul is also related to the mystery of the gods. According to the Lord of Music, when the soul is completely sublimated into divinity, then the mortal becomes God. Every spell inscribed in the soul does not need to build a spell model in the heart of the lake again. Only one idea can greatly simplify the process and directly motivate the magic. However, Wei has not been eager to construct a practical spell similar to fireball and flying in his own soul. As early as Savelli's determination to achieve the magic masters of all the mainstream magic schools, he began to think about how to truly complete this decision step by step. Now, the spells and inheritance collections of major schools have come to an end, but how to take the final step, the achievement of magic masters, becomes the key. It is no difficulty to achieve the magic masters for Wei, but how to win enough benefits in this step, and lay a solid foundation for the future dream of achieving one way to return to one, this is Wei one thing that needs to be contemplative. Wei is taking a road that is completely different from anyone. This road is opened by him. There is no guidance on the road ahead. Other achievements can only be used for reference. Everything must be explored slowly. When I thought of space surveying, Wei's eyes brightened. Can I finally integrate my understanding and mastery of each major school into a spell, and then engrave it in my soul when I achieve the Master of Magic? Grodic has undoubtedly made a successful demonstration for him. He wants to come to this space survey should be the space spell created by Grodic when he first became a Master of Magic. This is a whimsical thing for anyone else. To know that the second law Grodic has compiled 36 concealed inscriptions and a unique master language in order to incorporate all the insights of space magic into a spell, this is the ultimate success. If Wei wants to do this, it means that he must simultaneously integrate elements, protection, space, summoning, change, construction, and even the soul and the school of the dead, and compile a unique mage language into inscriptions, and finally build into real spell. This difficulty has increased several times. However, as the difficulty increases, the gain is also an increase in geometric multiples. By getting the Master's Certificate by engraving the original spell in the soul, you can get enough feedback, not only the soul level can jump again, but also the deeper insight into the mystery of the school. This epiphany even it is related to the possibility of promoting the legend in the future. Sometimes Wei is also thinking about whether the consciousness of the world is a man with virgin obsessive-compulsive disorder, otherwise why is it so emphasized for the first time? Only the magicians who really created the school can become the legendary magicians. They are essentially different from other legendary spellcasters who can display the 9-ring spell. And when you get the Master's card, whether the spells built into the soul are sufficiently innovative and powerful will also determine the potential of the magic master. Some people just change a little further on the achievements of their predecessors, and in turn achieve magic masters, then the 7-ring magician is their limit. Some people have accumulated years of experience, integration, and uniquely create a spell that suits you best, so you can naturally enter the 8 rings magician in the future. And some days of talent, you can master some kind of reason in the high-level magician stage, and integrate it into your own spells, then there is the possibility of achievement legend. So many people are stuck in front of the threshold of magic masters, not that they do not get the Master's Certificate, but want to be more perfect. Compared to the predecessors, Wei can be said to be standing on the shoulders of giants. Human magic has developed from 2,000 years, so I want to come to the first Farafad, the second Fagor. These people, Roddick, must have gone through some hard explorations, even detours. In the stage of achieving the Master of Magic, they can never have enough preparations for Wei, and Wei also has its own powerful arm, that is Zero. He and Zero are perfect partners and partners. He has magical creativity and imagination, while Zero has a meticulous thinking and powerful execution. The two are perfectly complementary, so that they have all the short-term integration and all the performances. The possibility of a school spell inscription. Then the first inscription, there is no doubt that the elemental school should be chosen. This Wei exploration is the deepest and the most intimate school. At this moment, Wei finally felt that he had made a big step forward from the dream of turning the law into one, and he would make unremitting efforts with his goals and direction. 11 Wei is not immersed in the inscription of the element, he still has a lot of important things to do, because he is not just a magician, but also a leader. The memory of Master Dai is equally precious. Davy Closer, the master of the Eight Rings magic, now the twin brother of the Marquis of Gloucester. There is no doubt that the Marquis of Gloucester has been a secret killer. A master of spiritual magic can easily solve most of the troubles in the world, quietly. There is not much time left for Ziwei to leave Pi Li. Ziwei needs to solve this problem before leaving, so it is necessary to set up a bureau. Looking back at the communication between the two brothers, Ziwei showed a confident smile. The identity of the hunter and prey has been transferred. He will never give the king a chance to kneel down. To be continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Arcane Age. Author, Yulin Dudu. Chapter 405. The identity of Master Davy is also a very big problem. Because the Master of Davy is still alive, he is one of the three masters of the White Raven's Schiller, the legendary caster, and the Soul Dream Plane. Although limited by the defects of the spiritual school, the real legendary magician cannot be achieved, but Schiller is a true legendary caster. In a sense, the existence of any legend is for him. They are all cockroaches and can easily be pinched to death. However, he has already killed his most proud disciple who passed down his clothes, Davy. The good news, however, is that the White Raven's Schiller has disappeared for a long time, and even Davy is not sure what his master is going to do. This is left to the time when Ziwei can breathe. As long as it is not directly facing Schiller, Ziwei is confident that he can perfectly disguise himself as Dai, and even secretly do something that Ziwei's identity is not convenient to do. In the dreamland of the mind, Master Davy has a mage tower of his own, and even trained 3 disciples, as well as a large number of native creatures as servants. This is a very substantial wealth, and Davy is relatively lonely in the weekdays, living in a simple way, rarely dealing with outsiders, and Ziwei has mastered the plane of the soul dream. Then you can pretend to be the soul magic for a long time. Grandmaster. However, this mage tower is full of the unique prohibition of various spiritual schools. Ziwei wants to control this mage tower, but also needs to master the spiritual inheritance and all the spiritual secrets. The 5th edition of the Palais Daily has been printed and sent out, and the old Murdoch's face has a nervous and uneasy look, because this period does not have a full-page color map. In fact, the sales of the 5th edition of the Par Daily newspaper also plummeted. Many readers who were full of expectations finally disappointed and did not pay for the daily newspaper. However, in the expectation of countless competitors, the sales volume of this edition of Par Daily was finally settled at 220,000. Although less than half of the record of 500,000 copies yesterday, the sales volume of 220,000 copies still crushed all the other newspapers in Pili, and stood firmly in the first place. In addition to the newly opened Ladies and Women column in this issue, the most popular readers are the novels of The Hovering Dragon newly created by Sylvester Frost. Compared with the previous Breaking the Sky with only 500,000 words, the total number of words in this hidden dragon will exceed 3 million, and the background story will be very close to reality, involving elements and protection. The main magic schools, such as space, summoning, and change, also involve other races such as elves, dwarves, dragons, etc., which is a step-by-step saga of magical novels. The chief president is too unremarkable. This novel is full of grandeur. It is a super novel that can suppress the air transport of the Par Daily. As long as Ziwei is serialized in the Parley Daily, the Parley Daily will never sell. In addition to the series of novels, in the Par Daily Nakano gradually opened a number of commentary columns. Ziwei and the Old Murdoch have communicated with the First National University of France, will soon be a speech by the Old Murdoch in his alma mater at the same time. Some qualified editors and journalists will be recruited. Although the Parley Daily fell from the most brilliant peak, but it has also stabilized the position of the French first media in just 5 days. It is a miraculous performance. Zai Wei was immersed in the understanding and mastery of the inheritance of the soul. At this moment, an inexplicable incitement suddenly came. Finally come. The Marquis of Clausel communicated with his twin brother Dai, which is a secret technique used in the inheritance of the soul. The first secret of Zai Wei is the secret technique. He also obtained the memory of Dai. Play the role of Davy in front of thousands of people. The misty white crow appeared again in front of the Marquis of Clausel, and the Marquis asked with an eager voice, "My dear brother, what about the master Zai Wei? He has mastered the magic of Ms Yin Yu." "I can't help it," the fog white crow responded. "Secretary. He is a believer in Ms Silvermoon." Marquis of Gloucester frowned, which was a bad news. "But he is just a six-ring magician, not enough strength to fear," the fog white crow reminded. "Six-ring magician." Marquis Clolux nodded. "Understood, my brother. I will recapture the Parley Daily in a way that can't be accused by anyone." "I wish you success, my brother." The misty white crow left, as if nothing had happened. The Marquis of Clausel returned to the bookshelf and flipped out an important document that was kept in the storage space of the magical object, with a line of characters, "The Parley Daily title ruling." The ruling was stamped with the seal of the king. It was just 30 years ago that the previous King Charles VII personally ruled that the ownership of the Parley Daily belonged to the Murdoch family. However, the Close family also left an important clause in this ruling, which is the priority clause. Article 6, if the Murdoch family has the idea of selling the Palais Daily, then the Closer family is the natural first purchaser. Under the same conditions, there is a priority to acquire the Palais Daily right. With this clause, the Closer family has the reason to continue to intervene in the Palais Daily, facing a newspaper that can be stable in more than 200,000 copies, not to mention a small high-level magic teacher. Even if it is a legendary strongman, the Closer family will win this important propaganda channel at all costs. Prepare some of the information collected over the past few days, and the Marquis of Clausel boarded the carriage and went straight to the French aristocratic coat of arms. The French Aristocratic Emblem Bureau is an old building with a history of 300 years. The white walls have been infested with rain and become pale yellow. The walls are covered with green ivy, which is full of the hot summer days that have arrived. A cool breath. The French Aristocratic Coat of Arms was established to manage the large and small aristocrats of the entire French kingdom. The Marquis of Gloucester is a large aristocrat in the kingdom. Naturally, there is no need to ring the bronze bell in the courtyard of the article. His respectful invitation was included. The Marquis of Clausel, the sergeant, "Do not know what you are doing here today." The receptionist was a middle-aged bald man in a black uniform with a tie. He was just the second son of the Earl, who did not inherit the qualifications of the family, had a far cry from the status of the Red Man in front of the king. To be continued. Arcane Age. Author, Yulin Dudu. Chapter 406. Generally, even if there is a dispute, these big aristocrats hold their own identities and send a housekeeper to inform them at the most. Now, the Marquis of Gloucester personally comes. It is not a small matter. The Marquis of Clausel took out a special document that was specially installed. "I came to exercise the priority decided by the first king." Actually involved in the first King Charles VII. The arbitrator sleek into the son's forehead and instantly came out with fine sweat. "Take it and look at it." It was the famous Parley Daily title ruling 30 years ago. "I have to know that the Parley Daily has swept the entire king capital in the past 5 days. The arbitrator has bought all of it in the first phase. How can he not know that this involves the Marquis of Clausel and a limelight? The confrontation between the master lords? If the Marquis of Gloucester can easily clean up the other party, it will not come to the aristocratic coat of arms." The arbitrator accepted this heavy document with respect. The Honorable Marquis of Clausel, We will investigate and implement this matter as soon as possible. The Marquis of Gloucester nodded with satisfaction and sighed, I will keep an eye on the progress of this matter. When the Marquis of Gloucester disappeared, the fat arbitrator directly held the document and ran all the way to the highest level of the aristocratic coat of arms building. His secretary. There is an important piece of information that needs to be reported to you, the arbitrators gasped and reported. The director of the French Aristocratic Emblem Bureau is a scholar who has studied the nobility, inheritance, heraldry, and history of the nobles, and his other identity is more famous, that is, the Duke of Créteil. The Créteil family is not a family with a heritage. There is no huge land and manor, and no business chambers are opened. However, no one dares to dare. Because the earliest land of the Créteil family was on the outskirts of Wangdepaly, deeply trusted and recognized by the French royal family. When the kings expanded the area 200 years ago, the Créteil family took the initiative to merge their land into the city of Paly, becoming a territory directly under the jurisdiction of the king. This high-spirited move was grateful to the royal family. Their family title was also directly drawn from the count to the duke by the king. Without the noble blood heritage, the Créteil family focused on cultivating their descendants to develop in the humanities of literature, law, history, etc., and eventually became a famous family of legal and literary families. Not only was the Duke of Créteil the director of the French aristocratic coat of arms, but his younger brother was the chief official of the French court of the French. And 50 years ago, 3 members of the Créteil family had become the famous authors of the French literary world, and they were collectively known as the Créteil. The old Duke of Créteil has been 70 years old and his hair is white, but his mind is not at all confused. The 30-year-old public case of the Par-Daily is still in the eyes of the lover. The Parly-Daily title ruling, in the end, King Charles VII supported the small Baron Murdoch, which means that the king is constantly weakening the privileges of the big aristocracy, and focuses on supporting the rise of the small aristocracy and the commercial class. This is a very historic ruling, but the Duke of Créteil did not expect the Closer family to take the ruling again 30 years later. After carefully reading all the documents, the Duke of Créteil took off his glasses, and the Closer family clearly occupied a certain truth, so the opening of the arbitral tribunal has become inevitable. To the notice of the Closer family and the Murdoch family, the arbitral tribunal was opened at 9 a.m. the day after tomorrow, the Duke of Créteil told him directly. The bald arbitrator got an accurate order and quickly retired, drafted 2 documents and sent them to 2 families. Paris Daily Ownership Arbitration Tribunal. Old Murdoch saw the notice and began to recall the scene 30 years ago. His face changed dramatically in an instant, and a seemingly insignificant long-forgotten clause finally jumped out of his memory. Priority clause: the Closer family has the priority to acquire the Par-Daily. Old Murdoch quickly took out the communication crystal and directly informed Ziwei of this important news. When Ziwei and Kamiao came together, the old Murdoch had already turned around in the room and did not know how many laps. I am sorry for Mr. Ziwei, I have forgotten this clause in the title of the year. Since it is a ruling, the Murdoch family naturally has one. Ziwei took it up and saw it. This is the counterattack of the Marquis of Clausel. The Marquis of Clausel apparently did not want to fight against Ziwei in a field that he was not good at. He opened a new battlefield directly in the field of the best, and stepped onto the table. 30 years ago the Marquis of Gloucester was not the upstart in front of the king. The Baron of the old Murdoch obviously did not mean anything. I thought about it a bit, and it seems that there is only one person who can help me. In the Rose Castle, the Duke Sophie Mathilde took the ruling paper 30 years ago and shook it gently. You finally came to take the initiative to find me, but I did not expect it to be this. The Midsummer Night Music Festival, not to mention the Master Ziwei, refused to attend. Even the chief reporter Joe did not come to interview. I am really a little disappointed. I have already sent a trump card to Miss Sophie. Should I think that I can offset these sins? Ziwei responded with a smile. Not bad. Your friend Johnny is a good seed. I have already summoned him specifically and laid the foundation for the bard for him. Of course, the dozens of classic songs specially written by Ziwei Master for him are the key to his success. Even I don't have this treatment. Sophie looked at Ziwei with a look of your face, her right thumb gently licked on the index finger and middle finger. Ziwei took a very interesting score. This is a song I wrote for female singers. Sophie's original deliberate face melted into a glacier and turned into a splendid flower. I know you must have stock. Seeing that Sophie is immersed in the long-awaited score, 11 Wei quickly reached out and held the hand of the crystal of the jade. The arbitral tribunal will open the court the next morning. Miss Sophie will be early for me. Refer to a clear road. With a light click, Sophie had to reluctantly close the score that had already been opened. Facing the west, Wei eyes hung. Obviously, the final result of this event will be aristocratic coat of arms to a large extent. The head of the bureau, the Duke of Cretial, is around. Duke of Cretial, asked Ziwei inexplicably. To be continued. Arcane Age. Author, Yulin Dudu. Chapter 407. Sophie explained the development history of the Cretial family for Ziwei. The Cretial family is undoubtedly one of the most supportive families of the royal family, and this family has a very good image in the eyes of the king, the nobility, or the citizens. The Closer family is also a good minister of the king in many people's perceptions, and the two are very different. After all, Sophie is the top powerhouse who is interested in sealing the gods. It is very thorough about the political situation in France. The arbitral tribunal will have 15 nobles present. They will listen to the defense of both sides and choose the support side. This is the first round of ruling. If one party is dissatisfied and there are more than 5 supporters, you can appeal. This time will be decided by 3 highly respected nobles. This round can also be skipped and directly applied for arbitration by His Majesty the King. That will be the final ruling, just like this one in my hand. So how did the aristocrats who attended the arbitration choose? Ziwei quickly asked. This is the key to the problem. The noble emblemery will issue a notice to the coat of arms at the time of the establishment of the arbitral tribunal. The nobility interested in participating in the arbitration will be able to sign up, Sophie explained. This time, whether it is close the family of the family or the Pardaily is considered to be the focus of many people. Therefore, there must be a lot of nobles applying for arbitration. The Duke of Cretial will choose the right person to form the aristocratic ruling seat. Then I was curious. How did the little Baron Murdoch win 30 years ago? This ruling is undoubtedly very biased towards the high-powered side. The gap between the Baron and the Marquis is so great. The Baron Murdoch just got 5 votes in the first round of the ruling. Sophie's face showed a mysterious smile. In the second round of the 3 high-ranking rulings, 1 more vote, so the third round appeal to the king. The influence of this arbitration case is getting bigger and bigger with the round of arbitration. The result of the final judgment is even more shocking. From then on, the power of the great aristocracy has been suppressed, and the rise of the small aristocrats and merchants is even faster. Obviously, Charles VII was a wise and venerable king. He manipulated the arbitration case and eventually hit the family and fostered the cold door. It's just that the Marquis of Gloucester is the identity of King Charles VIII, and Ziwei has a bit of a headache. He simply turned his attention to the peers in front of him, hoping she can help herself out. Good attention to the prince. In the first round of rulings, you are almost impossible to win. The key is to win 5 support tickets. Otherwise, even the appeal may be gone. Sophie Mathilde extended his left hand to the front of Ziwei. 5 white slender, the fingers are shaking. I will arrange a meeting with a Montreal lawyer for you. He is an expert in law and arbitration, and one of the editors of the 1765 version of the King's Code. 11 Wei nodded. It is true that Sophie has done a very hard work here. He has no foundation in Wangdu Pai Li, and he still listens to the opinions of professionals in this matter. Only from a legal point of view, The Murdoch family unilaterally sold the Priory to Mr. Sci-fi without giving notice. It is obviously a violation of the Closer family's priority if Croziel the family insists that the biggest possibility is that the contract signed by the Sci-fi and Murdoch family is invalidated. The two sides rebid. The Closer family enjoys the priority. Montreal lawyer is a handsome old man. He is a professor at the French law school. Legal authority. The price of Sci-fi's acquisition of the Par Daily was not great. After all, the Pi Daily had become a tabloid that sold less than 1,000 copies a day, and even stopped because of the illness of the old Murdoch. But in just 1 week, Par Daily has directly become the highest-selling newspaper in the whole of France, and its value has almost increased by 100 times. Once the contract is invalidated, it will be difficult for Westward to take back the ownership of the newspaper even if it pays 100-fold price, because the person who looks at the newspaper is not just a Marquis of Clausel. What is the explicit clause on priority in the King's Code? Asks Sci-fi. The King's Code mainly contains the King's decrees, criminal laws, etc. There are not many commercial laws, and there are no priority clauses. Montreal lawyers pushed the glasses, but in the current jurisprudence, priority has been the previous example, so I said it is very possible. But this case is in the arbitral tribunal of the aristocratic coat of arms, not in the asterisk. Sufi suddenly inserted a sentence, we only need to get 5 members of the aristocratic arbitrators. Montreal lawyers close with the documents, he shrugged, this is what I hate because you don't know the idea of the nobility that appeared in the arbitral seat at that time. He may vote for it because he is not pleasing to the eye. Mr. Montreal, I need you to help Mr. Sci-fi draft a speech in the arbitral tribunal and try to get more benefits. Sophie showed a mysterious smile. Yes, I am professional in this area, Duke of Mathilde. Montreal lawyer nodded. When the Montreal lawyer took a briefcase and took the carriage and left the Rose Castle, Sophie sat down with Sci-fi. Montreal lawyers are members of my vassal family, and professionalism and loyalty are trustworthy. But these are all, it is secondary. Members of the aristocratic arbitral tribunal will decide on the day before the arbitration case, that is, tomorrow. Although it will not be announced, I think you should be able to get the list in Sci-fi. At this moment, Sci-fi suddenly moved, he stopped, and the Marquis of Clausel contacted him again. David, my brother. I have applied for arbitration at the Noble Emblem Bureau. The list of arbitrators will come out tomorrow. Please help me to identify the specific candidates in advance. No problem, my brother, Westway responded. Interrupted contact, Sci-fi's face showed a bright smile. I didn't get it wrong, is that the Marquis of Clausel? Sophie seemed to want to laugh, but still held back. The hero sees the same thing. Sci-fi found that after he killed and replaced Davy, all the troubles from the Closer family became no longer troublesome. Although the French Magician Guild arranged a magical surveillance without a dead end in the entire kingdom, but the spiritual master only used mental power instead of magic, so it is possible to avoid the magic monitoring. To be continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Arcane Age. Author, Yulin Dudu. Chapter 408. If Sci-fi is only a young man with some creativity, then the failure of this arbitration is almost taken for granted. He lost the Par Daily and has the enemy of the Marquis of Clausel. He even has to do another 100 newspapers. I want to be successful. However, the most important identity of Sci-fi is a magician. Although he can't fully grasp the mystery of the soul in just 2 days, it can also make Sci-fi easily complete the reconnaissance mission. From the bald arbitrator, the list of 15 aristocratic arbitrators was known in advance, and Sci-fi specifically detected the tendency of everyone to express this arbitration. 11 Wei also handed the list to the Marquis of Clausel, and the Marquis of Gloucester quickly took advantage of less than a day to start a secret draw. Even the slapstick list includes the greedy guy of Murdoch. After being tortured by poverty for many years, he was almost immediately controlled by the Marquis of Gloucester, and decided to fight against the water in tomorrow's arbitration case, accusing Ziwei of taking advantage of the fraud and threats to seize the property rights of the par. However, Ziwei just looked at it quietly, which was enough to make a normal person desperate. Extraordinary power is the strongest means in the world. 11 Wei has realized this point more and more. He has no intention of indulging in the trajectory of the old world. He will use the violent means of integrity to break the game. In the early morning of May 25, the arbitral tribunal of the Parley newspaper opened. The arbitrator was the bald, and 15 aristocratic arbitrators stepped into the arbitration seat. One day, the Marquis of Closel received a guarantee of a full 12 people, and he has already won the prize. So when the Marquis of Gloucester saw the Murdoch father and son and the West Victoria who walked into the opposite seat, they showed all the smug smiles they had mastered. This arbitral tribunal is in court for the dispute over the ownership of the Par Daily. I will state the following facts. The bald arbitrator has finished the general situation. Does the parties confirm that the above is true? It's true. It's true. Old Murdoch is old, he just sits quietly behind Ziwei and little Murdoch. The Par Daily was just reborn in the hands of Mr. Ziwei. He knew that he and Mr. Ziwei had a huge gap in the level of reporting and background. Therefore, he fully supported Mr. Ziwei to win the arbitration. However, little Murdoch slowly opened the distance between Ziwei and Ziwei. Although he was greedy for money, he was not stupid. His next move would undoubtedly offend the star of Ziwei, a generally dazzling magician. After the arbitrator's statement was over, the two sides began to argue in court. The argument of the Marquis of Closer is obviously also found by the legal experts. The logic is deducted without any flaws, and the contract for the arbitration of the West and Murdoch family is invalid. 11 Wei also stood up and took out the arguments written by the Montreal lawyers. The two sides have their own reasons. The 15 aristocratic arbitrators have almost decided on their minds. Only 2 people are still hesitating. Ziwei has completed his task in the arbitration seat and smiled at the 15 aristocratic arbitrators. In silence, the spiritual power of Ziwei has begun to expand, turning into an invisible fog, and began to invest in aristocratic arbitrators already selected. The 15 aristocratic arbitrators are 12 men and 3 women. The highest status is an earl. The lowest rank is 3 jazzes. The highest rank is a 7th order knight, and the lowest is an ordinary person. Even with Dai's mental strength, it is difficult to control them all when they are awake, not to mention the existence of a jagged professional. However, Ziwei has long chosen 5 people who tend to vote for him. One of the women is the daughter of the Marquis of Paxis who had been photographed at the Orleans Manor dinner. She has decided to support herself unconditionally. There are still 2 others who maintain the superficial justice. They intend to observe the results and then vote. There are 2 people who have promised to the Marquis of Closel, but the mind is the least firm and the strength is very weak. One is ordinary. One is just a 2nd order knight. Just then, the most exciting scene in the arbitration took place. Little Murdoch trembled and stood up. He first looked at the Marquis of Close, who was opposite, as if he had gained strength, and shivered and said loudly, "I accuse the Marquis of Closel, and contact me privately yesterday. I want to testify that it is Mr. Ziwei's coercion to lure us to sell the Par Daily." The audience was amazed, and little Murdoch became the focus of everyone. Little Murdoch is going crazy at this moment. How can he say this? He clearly wants to correct the righteousness and plead guilty to Ziwei. However, at this moment, he could not master his own language and expression, and his face became red, completely incarnate in the indignation of the warriors. Our Murdoch family is only a small baron family, but as a man, I still have my own backbone. I will never be the dog of the Marquis of Closel. Old Murdoch's excited applause, he did not think that his son suddenly became so ambitious. Little Murdoch heard the applause of his father. He also saw the sudden darkness of the Marquis of Gloucester, and he was going to kill. At this moment, he had only one idea, that is, crying and crying. Ziwei showed an elegant smile and had a moment of eye contact with the Marquis of Gloucester. "Marquis of Closel, is this your means? Don't be too proud, Rabbit Bunny." The bald arbitrator had to suspend the procedure. He had already been instructed by the Duke of Cretial, and he had to preside over the arbitration without prejudice, so he had to hold his nose and look at the documents handed over by Murdoch. Then warn the Marquis of Closel. However, these did not affect the final result, and it was soon to the time when the 15 arbitrators in the aristocratic arbitrators chose to support which party. The bald arbitrator sang, "Now, I declare that this arbitration has reached the final ruling. 15 distinguished compatriots, your decision will directly affect the outcome of this arbitration. I hope that you cannot be the momentary feelings are blinded, and the most sensible choices must be made. To support the demands of the Marquis of Gloucester, please raise your right hand." Brushing, for a moment, 10 hands stood up like a grove. The Marquis of Gloucester won the arbitration without any suspense, but his face still did not look good. He stared at the two guys who promised himself, why not raise his hand? However, the two members were calm, as if they had never made any private transactions. To be continued. Arcane Age. Author, Yulin Dudu. Chapter 409. Please support the Murdoch family's appeal. Please raise your right hand, the bald arbitrator continued to ask. This is not a passing, because there is a possibility of abstaining in addition to supporting either party. However, this time, there were still 5 hands raised, and 15 aristocratic arbitrators all made their own choices. Then I announced this Palais arbitration, the winner is the Marquis of Closel, the bald arbitrator said to Ziwei and Little Murdoch, because you got no less than 5 votes in support, have the right to appeal. I wonder if you will exercise the right of appeal. We will continue to appeal, as 30 years ago, as an unyielding fighter, Little Murdoch never gave up the last hope. Then the two sides are waiting for the next notice of the arbitral tribunal. The bald arbitrator ended the arbitration in accordance with the procedure. It is not too difficult to control the actions of a sober person. It is difficult for them to think that this is the real thought in their hearts. In the inheritance of the soul, there are such techniques and means of moistening and subtly affecting each other's thoughts and perceptions, while Ziwei does not need any method of casting materials, and there is almost no means of casting traces at the same time. Affected the 4 aristocratic arbitrators, it is the best spiritual mystery in the inheritance of the soul. The reason why it is not called a spell is because these secrets do not involve spell models, do not need to use magic, just rely on mental skills. As long as the first round of rulings has passed, the next 3 big nobility rulings will not be a problem, because Sophie Mathilde has promised to appear as a platform for Ziwei. As one of the only 12 dukes of the entire French kingdom, she is already the top and most privileged of the French aristocracy, and will certainly be the candidate for the final 3 grand aristocrats. This means that this arbitration case will inevitably reach the face of King Charles VIII, which has been the case for many years. In fact, this form of aristocratic arbitration is not a fair arbitration. To a large extent, the outcome of the arbitration will depend on the power status of both parties. However, this is the insistence of all French aristocrats. Only civilians will argue in the courts of France. After the results of the first arbitration came out, Ziwei directly published a commentator's article in the Palais daily newspaper with another pseudonym, screaming with his vest and slamming the greedy face of the Closser family. This article, like a deep water bomb, was put into a calm lake, instantly detonating the attention of the entire Palais citizens, and even more than a midsummer night music festival into the middle section. How much people like the current Palais daily, How much hate this best-selling newspaper that the average citizen likes falls into the control of the Marquis of Clausel. Ziwei used an alarmist way to tell the story that once the newspaper fell into the hands of the big nobility, the public could no longer see the articles that they liked and heard, and could no longer make their own voices. Ziwei has established the Parley Daily as a typical example of standing with the majority of the Parley citizens. This is the influence that the authoritative media can really show, killing people without a knife. Almost in an instant, the Marquis of Clausel became a street mouse that everyone called. For those nobles who have been passed down from generation to generation, the people are afraid and yearning, but with the changes of the times and the awakening of the people, the more people who came, the more they were not willing to be slaves to the nobles, they were naturally controlled by them. Within the nobility, the Marquis of Clausel is not a family of Dukes of Orleans or the Duke of Roses, who have a good reputation and status for generations. On the contrary, because the Marquis of Clausel had no reason to kneel at the king, many people secretly mentioned that the Marquis of Clausel was a look of despise. After all, the Clausel family had only one small viscount before 100 years. As the storm gradually fermented, the Marquis of Clausel became more and more embarrassed, and at the same time, he became more and more determined to completely defeat Ziwei and to control the Parley Daily in his hands. King Charles VIII of France was not a stupid king. On the contrary, the entire kingdom of France was almost always under his control. Therefore, as the Duke of Créteil was summoned twice to enter the Palace of Versailles, the ownership of the Paris newspaper directly skipped the big aristocratic arbitration and entered the final king arbitration. On the morning of May 30th, the fathers and sons of Siv and Murdoch will enter the Palace of Versailles, and the final confrontation with the Marquis of Clausel in front of the king. Since Murdoch's wonderful performance at the arbitral tribunal of the noble emblems, he knew that he had already sinned the Marquis of Clausel, so he completely invested in Ziwei's side. Never dare to have any small moves. Charlie VII is a wise lord. He will never favor him because of the position of the Marquis of Gloucester. Sophie explained to Ziwei, I will also be big. At that time aristocratic representatives entered the Palace of Versailles to participate in this king arbitration. I already have the confidence to win, Miss Sophie. 11 Wei gently picked up a rose that fell to the ground, with a confident smile on his face. Yes? Very good, then I am looking forward to your wonderful performance. Sophie did not ask, she was very confident in Ziwei, a Marquis of Clausel, not at all in her eyes. After the first arbitration, the Marquis of Clausel once again communicated with his twin brother Davy. Under the guidance of Ziwei, he finally made a decision that seemed to be a winner. The Palace of Versailles is a royal castle built by the first king of the Charlie family. It is located in the western suburbs of Paris, and is a vast and magnificent place. It is the most magnificent castle in the world. On the day of May 30th, Ziwei took a carriage that looked very ordinary and entered the Palace of Versailles with Murdoch and his son. Ziwei is very much looking forward to the arrival of this day. This will be his first meeting with King Charles VIII and will be an opportunity to have a deeper understanding of the king. In the interior of the Palace of Versailles, a few people in Ziwei walked down the carriage, and the pure blue carpet at the foot, like the vast sea, directly extended to the magnificent regent seat in the distance. The main hall of the Palace of Versailles is 50 meters high. The top structure of the main hall can be changed. Now all the organs are opened, the golden sunlight passes through the narrow gap of the road, and is reflected on the rock wall of the hall where the gold powder is applied. It became a magnificent temple built of pure gold. To be continued.